Time for world politics, and a lot's going on in the world. We'll be talking about that and seeing what all is happening. Apparently, Trump is beginning the process of dismantling the education department. So that's one thing that folks are talking about, as he has signed an executive order to dismantle the education department. And we were talking about that earlier, and we'll see how people think about that and how that plays into what's going on and all along those lines. So that's one of the things that folks are talking about. And Trump says he wants to take over Ukraine's nuclear plants. And what would that mean? So folks are trying to figure that out, as Trump demands that U.S. could take over Ukraine's reactors is not credible, according to The Guardian. So The Guardian isn't thinking that this is a real conversation that needs to be had, and all along those lines. And the Washington Post reported that a partial ceasefire is going on, and that partial ceasefire in that area is not actually working out, and all along those lines. So I'm definitely curious to see what Sasha has to say about this, since the partial ceasefire comes with a warning from Kyiv. Apparently, Russia is already breaching deals, and all along those lines. So definitely a lot going on in the political landscape, including Israel expands the Gaza ground offensive as Hamas fires rockets at Tel Aviv. And definitely, according to the Christian Science Monitor, abandoned by everyone, Gazans watch the bombs fall. So definitely, folks are asking, where does the Hamas-Israel ceasefire stand now? And definitely, I guess they'll try to renegotiate another ceasefire, since apparently both sides have broken that particular ceasefire, and all along those lines. So definitely lots going on, including M23 rebels capturing strategic mining hub of Walikale in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. So Congo rebels dismiss ceasefire calls and capture a strategic town. So Rwandan-backed rebels are pushed into the mineral-rich town in Congo, ignoring ceasefire calls. Seems like there's a lot of folks trying to have ceasefires. Now, whether these ceasefires are actually working or not, that's another question. And China executed 4 Canadians for drug crimes, according to Ottawa, and China condemns China's execution of 4 Canadians on drug convictions, and all in that space. So definitely, we got a lot going on in the world of politics, and this is the political show. There's even a political free fall in Turkey, where Turkey is facing protests and investor flight after opposition leaders arrest. And so Turkey arrested the Istanbul mayor, who is a key rival to President Erdogan. So definitely a lot's going on in that space. So I'm going to bring in my good friends and everything and see what they've got to say about a number of these things, including whether ceasefires ever work or they don't work, or all along those lines. So I'll bring in Rick and also Sasha Starr, and I've got Jacoby with me as well. But what is y'all's take on this? It seems like every time I turn around, there's a ceasefire, and then there's a
ceasefire. So ceasefires don't really work, but strongmen never fall either. We always hear about, Netanyahu on the brink. Putin, this is his last gasp because he's got some disease, and like Erdogan, Iran about to have a revolution. When is any of that going to freaking happen?
Good question. Apparently, even in Indonesia parliament passed a contentious amendment to military law. So Indonesia's parliament passes a bill that critics say evoke an authoritarian path. So apparently a lot of the countries are trying to be more authoritarian. So are we
social media and COVID cooked our brains. Our IQs are 10 points. The Earth's average IQ is probably down 8 or 10 points since 15 years ago. And we're going to stumble into dumb the same way that Earth stumbled into dumb horror in the 1920s into the 1930s.
Yep, that could be the case.
So I was just going to say that, ceasefires actually work when you have actual consequences, or because we've done ceasefires in the past. Plenty of nations have done ceasefires in the past. But they're not going to, right now, the ceasefire for Russia and Ukraine, that's not going to work. Trump is on Russia's side. So why is he going to hold Putin accountable for breaking a ceasefire? the ceasefire with Israel and Hamas is not going to work, because how is Trump going to hold his buddy Netanyahu accountable, or what's going on there with Hamas? He's not going to do that. Yes, we used to be the world's police. We used to be the world's trusted advisor in that situation, but we're no longer that anymore, because we can't trust the individual that we have in the White House. The only thing he wants a ceasefire or a peace deal for, he doesn't care what happens to Ukraine. He really doesn't. He doesn't care what happens to the people in Gaza. He doesn't. All he wants to do is to be able to say, hey, I deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. That's what he wants. So therefore, he's going to try and get Zelensky to surrender to Putin. He's going to try and hand deliver Ukraine to Putin. So then there will be no war. So, hey, I stopped all the wars, and I deserve a peace prize. How many times did he talk about there were, quote unquote, no wars up under him when he was in office the first time, even though we still had the Afghanistan war going on while he was in office? So he doesn't care. He wants name recognition. He wants to be able to brag. Same thing with the Time Magazine cover. That's why he printed off, before he was on Time Magazine, he had printed off and had in his in Mar-a-Lago a fake Time Magazine cover so he could be on the cover of it. So again, he doesn't care. He just wants, hey, look, I deserve the Peace Prize. Now look what I did.
Hey, and this is for Sasha, really quickly. He does seem to be loath to criticize people that are got maybe more power than he has, or are equally have equal power, or have some power that he maybe wants to be their best friend or whatever. But even the Washington Post earlier today says that to bring peace to both the Israel and Ukraine, Trump will have to exert pressure on two leaders he has so far been loath to criticize publicly. So he doesn't want to criticize Prime Minister Netanyahu. He doesn't seem to want to criticize Putin and everything. So is that part of the problem, that he doesn't want to criticize these folks even if they might be in the wrong?
Trump doesn't think that deep at all. He is a very primitive animal who is very vindictive. He's mean-minded, who wants to destroy everything. And even if you follow his business career or his book, Art of the Deal, actually somebody called it Fart of the Deal, whatever it might be. It's not enough for him to have a good deal for himself. That's not. It's about humiliation of the other party. It's belittle the other party. It's take full advantage and ruin and get right into the ground the other party. That's what he's all about. That's what his life career, if you follow how he was hiring illegal workers on his first real estate projects in Manhattan. He had illegal Polish immigrants. They had to, they were day and night. They were spending 24 hours a day in horrible conditions. Some of them were dying. And even at the end of the day, those who survived, he wouldn't pay. Okay, take me to court. You'll see, you'll never see your money in the next 27 years. And of course, they couldn't do it. That's what he is all about. It's a vindictive son of a bitch. That's what he is. And Musk is not much better. Look at what he is doing. He is dismantling the agency that would follow up on his crashes of Tesla, killing so many people. So how get rid of that? He just dismantled that every agency. That's possible only in America, nowhere else in the world. Even in any African country, you will not find anything close to what's happening right now in United States of America.
Yeah, but in that same line and everything, Sasha, apparently I was reading an article where apparently he's still mad over a deal that went not his ways that involved Canadians. Because the article I was reading said that there's an attorney, Mitchell Wine. He's a Canadian attorney, and a couple of friends of his said that they are now saying that it could be all their fault, and they were saying that with a chuckle because apparently back in 2016 he represented a group of investors who sued Trump, the Trump Organization, and others, alleging that they received false information about purchasing condominiums at the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Toronto. So,
in Toronto, and I know the story. I know even some people who were at the head of this project. This is nothing but bamboozle. And but Trump has many projects around the world which had same results. They would make a huge announcement, it's a Trump Tower, and Trump would show off and so on. And then once everything is collapsed and all investors would lose their money, Trump would say, "Oh my God, I didn't know that. I just gave my name. I was not involved in a project. I know nothing about it." It's same thing with Trump University. It's same thing. This is sleazy scumbag. That's all what he is. What are we talking about? Now, with Ukraine, it's even worse because he has a pathological hate for Ukraine and for Zelensky. This is pathological, and he'll try to do everything to make sure that he's still alive when Zelensky will die. So he will do exercises, he will run every day, he will stop eating hamburgers and all that stuff just to see when and how Zelensky will die. We'll see whether he'll manage to do it.
yeah.
He's much older, of course, than Zelensky, as you know.
Well, you talked about this yesterday, and I think you'll probably be talking about it in a couple of shows, including your Ukraine-Russia show and everything like that. But apparently, Canada is seeking defense ties and deals with Europe as the U.S. is pulling back. So apparently, there's this conversation even from the Embassy of France that Canada and France are peaceful powers and reliable allies. So are we going to see more of the European countries turning to Canada and having a stronger alliance and less of an alliance with the United States? And this is for anybody, but what's our take on this new world order?
Well, I'll just make a comment about Canada. Is we were extremely lucky to get this new prime minister who is way much stronger than Trudeau. Way much. There's just no comparison. This man was, for 7 years, he was the head of Bank of England. He was specifically hired from Canada, where he also had a very big position. And for 7 years, he did just that. And he's incredibly smart, educated, well-mannered. And you can't even picture him and this scumbag in one room. I'm talking about Donald Trump, of course.
Right. Oh, okay. Here's the deal. Right now, the U.S. is on crack and will remain on crack for 4 more years, roughly. And then, if we're lucky, we'll get some reasonable, politicians in charge, and it'll take a long, we'll get back on the wagon. We'll apologize to the world, and it'll take years and years, maybe a decade, if we keep our nose clean or our veins clean, for the world to start trusting us again.
And speaking of keeping the nose clean and everything like that, I saw this story that is about politics, but it's actually about the world. And I got to ask you about this, Rick, because you love statistics and you love numbers and everything like that. But apparently we've got this number that's been floating around there for a while as to how many people are in the world and everything. But there's a new study that says that we may be off. There may be way more than the official 8.2 billion people on the planet. A new study just came out with earlier today. So apparently we vastly underestimated the amount of people that are here on the earth. Maybe there's 10 billion people. Maybe there's 11 billion.
How did we screw that up?
I'm getting to look.
Where are the extra people?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. But there's these studies that says that their researchers warn that the needs of rural residents could be underrepresented. So I'm thinking maybe some of the rural people didn't actually like to get counted and everything, because they're saying there could be a billion more people living on Earth than currently thought, according to a new study which claims that rural figures worldwide, and I've even heard that among our local census, could be vastly underestimated. So if you're trying to get a count of people in, say, the Amazons, you're probably not going to get everybody to want to get counted and everything.
Okay, I'm looking at the article here. Um, I mean, I don't know if that's terrible news for the world, because I would bet that the well, the Amazon. You don't want a ton of people in the Amazon because they cut down the trees and burn the forests, and they're destroying the rainforest. But I would guess that most people in rural areas have not as much of a carbon footprint. If they can't, if you can't find them to count them, they're probably not consuming as many resources.
That can, that can
And it's starting to look like what will save us from climate change might be technology. It won't be changing people's behavior. It'll be coming up with cleaner tech, but it also is going to be getting people to have fewer babies, which we're already doing because we're so distracted by life. So we may reach peak humanity in the 2050s instead of the year 2100.
But Rick, couldn't that be part of the problem though? Because I hear what you said, and you've been saying this for a number of shows that we're having fewer babies, and part of that is that there's a lot of distractions. There aren't as many distractions in the country, so maybe the people in the country are actually having more babies and then less babies because they don't have as much access to some of this wonderful technology and some of this other stuff. So they might actually be doing like the bunnies and everything, and doing more sex than less sex.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know, but
I'm sorry, it's estimated that to bring up baby cost you over time $300,000 plus. So maybe for some people it's better to be distracted by some video games or whatever other stuff than to have liability of $300,000 and that baby eventually will leave your house and get married or something and will not even give you a call once a month. And so what's happened with your $300,000? Think about it.
and that's if you just go to public school. You send your kid to private school, the cost of that kid is going to be $750,000.
Yeah, well, I assume that most of the people will not send their kids to private schools. They will go to public schools. But $300,000 still a lot of money. And I don't think that people will get so much enjoyment from this $300,000. At the same time, they can have luxury vacations, travel, do shopping, and just enjoy life. I really don't understand about that. I mean, when we arrived to Canada many years ago, our daughter was already 2 years old. She was born in Odessa, in Ukraine. And if we would start our life here and just got married, we would never have kids. Never. My wife was thinking about maybe second kid once in a time, and I was completely refused. I see, no, if you will take a piece of paper, divide it by 2, okay, here's your liabilities, and here's your potential, here's your gains, whatever you might call it, a gain, and I see a lot of liabilities, very little gains, if any.
Yeah, coming back to
that article on population, I scanned it quickly, and the interesting thing is where they got their numbers saying we were undercounting is places where they put up a dam and they flooded most of the places in China. China loves to put up dams and flood hundreds of square miles, and before they flood it, they have to go in and make sure all the people are out. And I guess they found more people than they thought there were going to be when they went in to clean out these areas.
Yeah, they might have found more people and everything. I want to come back to world politics, and this is for you, Sasha, because it was one of the things with Trump, and we're talking about how crazy and idiotic he can be and everything. But he's had this notion that Russia has encircled the Ukrainians, and in talking to you and Jonathan and Ivan, it doesn't seem like they've been encircled. So where did he get this idea from, and where is this kind of like intelligence that he is getting in terms of military intelligence?
No, he's not getting intelligence from his people. He doesn't trust anybody in his intelligence. He's getting that directly from Putin. It was Putin who spread this stupid lie that the Ukrainian soldiers were encircled and it was a mercy from Putin to let them stay alive. So this is such a lie, 100%. And it's just horrible that Trump repeats this lie without verifying. Okay, so my source is Mr. Putin. That's what he said. Could you verify it? Is anybody else in the world said the same thing? Probably not. So he's not very smart man, is Trump at all. He's not.
Oh, I have something that's not politics, but and Jacoby will guess it in a second. I've been driving through a movie set every day in North Hollywood. There's a shortcut between two of the gyms I go to that takes me through an abandoned shopping center that gets used a bunch for movies, and it's been set up and to look like both the 1950s and like Las Vegas. And it took me till today to figure out what production it is. 1950s, kind of half Vegas, half post-apocalypse.
Yeah, they're supposed to be filming that. I thought they had started filming a month ago. I thought they started filming that.
They've been going for I don't know, probably a month and a half.
Yeah, because they're supposed to drop that new season coming later this year, isn't it? Because what we saw in
name the show.
Yeah, name the show.
It's Fallout. It's the New Vegas one, which is going to be the second season of Fallout. So in Fallout, the first season tried to mainly deal with, introducing all the characters, and they skimmed, the first game and the second game some, but it was mainly on the third game. And they didn't bring in the Deathclaw, which everybody really wants to see how they're going to animate the Deathclaw, because that's the big bad. That's one of the big bads in Fallout. And when they do Fallout New Vegas, there's a lot of stuff in Fallout New Vegas, which is freaking hilarious, because you've got the super mutants that have this giant hotel. Oh my goodness.
I don't play video games, so I don't know a lot of the details. But one crazy real life detail is that this apocalyptic wasteland is next to a huge homeless encampment. So you've got a fake dystopia right next to a real dystopia.
Speaking of that and everything, and this comes
That's
back
pretty
to
wild.
speaking of that, and this comes back to world politics and also television, because it was very popular in terms of a theme of detective shows and all along those lines. But apparently Thursday, which is today, marked the 35th anniversary of the 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attack. And I do know that some of the TV shows, including FBI and others, have talked about this notion of chemical attacks and the possibility of chemical attacks. So for those of you, and Rick, you're in the Hollywood area, but Sasha was in the military, how concerned should we be about real chemical attacks even in this day and time? Because apparently this was done by the Shinrikyo Doomsday Cult, and it killed 14 people and injured over 6,000. But I know there have been a number of episodes of even television shows and some of the crime shows that have talked about this notion of chemical attacks. So with all going on in the world, whether it's Israel or Ukraine or the Democratic Republic of Congo or El Salvador or wherever, how concerned we should be about chemical attacks?
So, I mean, your odds of dying in a terrorist attack are teeny, but because we live in a nation of 1/3 of a billion people, but everything bad that happens gets reported on the news, even though it happens to a tiny fraction of everybody. So, but the scary thing about sarin, I think, can't you make it at home from beans?
I believe so, but maybe Sasha might have a better idea and everything. Can you make it? Can it be made homemade and everything? Or
I know that Walter White on Breaking Bad made some kind of super bad poison. I thought it was it sarin? I don't know. I'll look it up.
In terms of the politics stuff, by the way, Fallout.
That was a different thing.
Ooh, I'm in a bad spot.
Okay.
Well, there are always chances to get killed by the chemicals, by biological weapons, and finally by nuclear weapons, and not so nuclear weapons, just any weapon, kitchen knife, Tesla car. There's just enough ways to get killed. So why would I worry about one way of being killed versus others? Just,
There's a great new show
yeah.
called Adolescence, taking place in England, which is like, it's basically about angry teen boys, incel boys, who there's been an epidemic, because there are no guns in England. So people have to use knives for their, their mass killings. And this, it's a sad story, but it's a freaking great job of telling the story. It's 4 episodes. Each episode is a single take for an hour that you may not know you love it, but you will love it when you see, like in Goodfellas, it begins with like a 10-minute take where the camera doesn't stop. There are no cuts. You see this guy walking through a rest. Just a ton of stuff happens. It follows a guy as he walks into a fancy restaurant in the 60s. He's a mafia guy. And that's how they shoot this adolescent show. Every show is an hour without a single cut. The camera just keeps moving.
So the budget was much smaller than it should have been.
No, I don't know, because they said to rehearse it, they did 10 rehearsals.
Yeah, but for rehearsals, you don't pay that much money as you pay for actual shooting.
I guess so.
Yeah. But that's, it's good. Maybe I'll take a look.
There's also another show there are a couple of different shows that are out there that are like that. Matter of fact, The Wire itself was a good show about politics in Baltimore, and they covered it really well in terms of thinking about death and everything. I'm with Sasha on that. I mean, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. I'm not gonna sit there and worry about it. But in terms of the politics and stuff, also with Fallout, honestly, Fallout's whole story, the game itself, is all about politics. Fallout is similar to a Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is all about politics. And you have the different factions that you got to work with and try and figure out who you're going to be able to talk to, negotiating peace deals between different factions and stuff. That's something that is in plenty of different stories that are out there. One that I think that I honestly, if you haven't seen The Wire, definitely watch The Wire. Like I said, it's well done. It really dives heavily into Baltimore politics, and that came out a long time ago. We Run This City is another one. We Run This City, or We Own This City, is about New York police officers. I think it's New York police officers that are dealing with it now.
They're all corrupt as hell. Yeah.
Oh, and it's great. Another one, if you want a British version, if you look at Top Boy, Topboy, that is actually a good show dealing with the drug cartels as well as some political stuff that goes on in there. That one's on Netflix.
If you want a bad show about all this, there is Lioness on Showtime. Showtime replaces quality with boobies. So if you want to see Zoe Saldana's boobs and her butt and some other people's boobs and learn a little bit about cartels and the politics of the border, Lioness is okay to have running in the background.
Okay. Nice to know.
But the best show ever about Canada, remember Stripes? Now, Sasha, that's right up your alley. That was Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd going across the border. Oh, that was such a great show. Such a great show.
Another Canadian show filmed in Toronto that I think is awesome. Working Moms, which sounds like it should be terrible, but it's by Ivan Reitman's kid, and it's freaking hilarious, and it's very filthy. Yeah.
Working Moms. Yeah, I heard about it, but I never seen it.
It's great, and
I've heard from a few people. Yeah. that it's really a good show. We'll try to.
I want to. So while we're off on this tangent, I want to bring something up with Jatovy, which is comic books. See, my problem with comic books, especially from the golden age of Marvel, which would have been the early to mid 60s, is a lack of quality control. And hold on, it's okay. There wasn't a golden age of horror comics, which was EC in the 50s, and those were freaking great. Everybody making those was a freaking genius. And the people making Marvel comics, from which we're getting all the stories that are turned into movies. There have been 35 Marvel movies so far. But the trouble is that you had too few people cranking out too much material, and it was aimed at kids, so there wasn't as much quality control over the stories as there maybe should have been. You get quality control now because now you're spending $250 million to make the movie, so you bring in a ton of good writers and they work the material. But back then, you had Stan Lee and a crew of like half a dozen other writers, and they just cranked it out because they were doing what, 12 titles a month?
So really, the golden age of comics really wasn't then. That's just the beginning of the comics, where you had Black Panther and all this other stuff coming out. So when you look at the golden age of comics, where the real,
I don't want to argue about when it was. I just
no. But
the source material for all these Marvel movies, a lot of it comes from the 60s.
And that came from the 60s and the 50s and exactly.
So here's my point. Like when you're writing, so hold on, when you're writing TV, like you write some stuff and you've got a room of 10 people, and then the boss, if the boss is a quality producer, says, yeah, that's a good start, but now we got to do another pass and another pass and another. Like for the Oscars, the host of the Oscars might get 1,000 jokes written by his people, and he might pick the best 20 out of 1,000. So you've got huge quality control for these Marvel comics. From there, and plus it was for kids. So like the source material could have been better.
Yep, could have been better.
So let me push back on that a little bit, because that golden, where they're pulling from are stories that are obscure and stories that really weren't, the dominant this and that. Like, for example, even with the Iron Man story that they pulled from, they could have pulled from some cool ones that you would honestly like, because even back then, comics were never written for kids. Comics actually were written for adults. Same thing with the cartoons that were out there, because they're heavily political. Comic books and Marvel, the X-Men was created to try and express and get people to accept diversity. That's all X-Men was, to accept people for who they are and what they are. But if you look at some of the great stories that haven't been done and that should be done, there's some great writing that's out there. For example, if you and this wasn't too long, this was actually before the Avengers came out. There was a guy, Mark Millar. He's still a writer now. He's actually when they started doing the Ultimates, because Jeff Loeb was a part of doing Hulk Gray and Hulk Daredevil Yellow and stuff like that. That was very deep in terms of what these actual characters really meant. But if you look at Mark Millar, this is the actual what you're, I think, wanting out of the comics. Look up Mark Millar, the Ultimates. Hold on real quick, Mark.
No, I was going to keep it on the comic books and everything, because a book that I am very much a fan of and everything, and is actually written by a father of somebody that is tied to Durham and everything. But it is a book talking about what you just said, which is how comic books were actually political statements. And if you are familiar with Rodrigo Dorfman, you know his dad, who is from Chile, Area Dorfman, and they wrote a book called How to Read Donald Duck, which that looked at the capitalist ideology of the works of some of the most beloved comic books out there. So if he said that it wasn't just a story about the mice and the ducks and everything that people think about, but it had some political overtones as well and everything. So even Disney had that, and that book was highly popular and everything.
Yes, but just to get it out for Rick, Rick, check into Mark Millar. You remember the movie Wanted that came out?
The bullets that went in a circle? Yeah. Exactly.
So that came from a comic. That actually was Mark Millar's comic. And Mark Millar wrote that. When you look at the actual images of the comic.
Also, we got to get off of this pretty soon because we're losing Sasha here.
Yeah, and
Oh yeah. So this is really quick. This is really quick. Hold on, this is really quick.
That's okay. Keep going. I'll see you tomorrow.
No, I had a question for
Well,
you.
there's actually a ton of stuff. And yeah, Mark, Rick, just look up Mark Millar and look up the Ultimates and stuff like that. You'll like that.
Stuff, and we've lost them already because I do have a question for everybody who was kind of alluding to what y'all were talking about as well and everything like that, because definitely that is something that folks talked about. And apparently, even when that book was translated, the book that I was talking about, they managed to have all 4,000 copies impounded in the U.S. and ultimately 1,500 copies of the book were allowed into the country. That the rest of the shipment was blocked, and until now, no American publisher has dared re-release the book, which sold over 1 million copies worldwide. And
what book is this?
It's the book that's called How to Read Donald Duck. It was written by a Chilean political in person and everything like that. It was written by Ariel Dorfman, and his son Rodrigo is still very much involved in the film industry, and Armand Art and everything. But if you're not familiar with the book, definitely check it out, because it even talks about some of the ways that revolution and other things were covered. But I was going to come back to both of you and still get back to politics. Hold on, but still, because it kind of, I wish Sasha was still here and everything, because apparently France did something that I found very fascinating, but I'd love to hear y'all's takes on this, because apparently the French Prime Minister, Francis Bayrou, plans to distribute a survival manual to every household with instructions on how to prepare for the imminent threat amid concerns over an emboldened Russia and weakened security support from the United States. So they're planning to put out this book that's going to tell you how to survive in this crazy world of ours, which is what we were talking about at the beginning of this show. So do we need a manual like that here in the United States and everything? Because
we used to have stuff like that, but in the 50s and 60s, but it all revolved around nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
Buildings, like sturdy buildings in every city and town, there used to be fallout shelters. Well, that's where you get the name Fallout from. You'd go into a basement, you'd have food and water, you'd seal it off as best you could until the radioactive air kind of drifted away from you.
And if it proves,
well, the big thing now, and it wouldn't be around the nuclear shelter stuff or around nuclear stuff right now, because of the way the immigration system is going, the way that the push for, all non-white males in the country right now, from being picked up, individuals being picked up, working at Target, we're going to end up needing another green book.
And that's what this is actually going about in France, because if approved, the manual will be launched before the summer, according to the French broadcaster Europe 1 Radio, and it would aim to offer practical advice to citizens on how they can protect themselves and their loved ones in the face of imminent danger. So divided into 3 sections, the manual will include a list of emergency contacts for the police and the fire service and ambulance, which everybody should have even in their telephone books and everything, as well as which radio channels to tune in for more information. And in the face of a nuclear threat, it advises closing doors and windows, along with the details on how to volunteer for reserve units or firefighting group. What closing the doors? What closing the doors don't do for
There's another guy that's out there. There are red cards out there. My Y has stacks of them. It's a little laminated red card that tells you your rights if ICE stops you, or if ICE comes to your door.
No, I've heard of people that have
that's actually that's going to be more necessary than anything, because again, the red cards tied into a green book thing for a lot of the immigrants, a lot of the minorities in the country, because of the way things are headed, or the way things are going at this moment. It
shouldn't be a green book. It should be a green book app that updates, like Waze does. Like it'll tell you moment to moment, don't take this street because ICE is working that street.
Rick, some of these things that they're talking about in France don't make any sense. Maybe I'm just not giving the French enough credit and everything. But the recommendations include getting together a survival kit that consists of at least 1.5 gallons of water. What that's supposed to do in a nuclear attack is beyond me. A dozen tins of food, that makes sense. A first aid kit, medicine, batteries, and a flashlight. So that's what is supposed to be in this kit. And some of this, I'm thinking, it's not going to do you much good if it's that deep of an attack and everything. But maybe
that's not enough. I mean, my wife, who's very prepared, has set up several survival stations in our house where we just have a bunch of like food and non-perishable food and some water. And I don't know, I guess we could live off of that stuff for a couple weeks, but I don't know, like the threat of nuclear has never gone away. And now, if we didn't have idiots in charge, now would be the time to do some more arms control, because AI is not going to turn into Skynet, but it will be destabilizing. It's going to, people will make judgments based on AI in the future. And some of those judgments, could point us in the direction of nuclear conflict.
Well, I mean, AI, people are making judgments based off of AI now. So it's only going to get more entrenched within our society to do that. I mean, people ask Alexa what to do all the time, or, Siri what to say all the time. So, yeah, I mean, it's just more and more entrenched within our society. We use it every day, and yeah, more people are going to use it. But again, the nuclear piece, that's never going away, and that fear is never going away. But again, that's not really the bigger fear. Again, that's why I hate to harp back on the green book and the red card stuff, but that's where a lot of that fear is right now in the US. Maybe in France, it might be the nuclear setup, but more in the US, it's, hey, I'm afraid to. That's why you have the sanctuary cities. The reason why people, even there's low immigrant crime, but people aren't going to report the crime because of what's going on right now. You can't call the cops because I may be taken away from my family. So there's a lot of issues with everything that's happening right now, and that's where the whole green book and the red book is going to have to come.
To go back to comic books, the graphic novel Watchmen, which is what, 30 years old now?
Yep.
The gist of that story, or one of the spines of that story, is to make people back away from like a war. The power, the secret superpowers, Superman, the superheroes decide we need to make something terrible happen to unify humanity. And in this stupid novel I'm writing, people working with AI decide, people are not frightened enough of nuclear war. We need to set off a couple nukes. In a way,
like I said, Rick, in that fashion, really start diving into comics written in the 80s and 90s. You'd like Chris Claremont. You'd like was it Liefeld, who started Deadpool? You'd like a lot of the comics of that time in the 80s and the 90s.
I've seen a lot of them, but
because, like I said, there's what the topics they touch on and how they go about it. I mean, I really like Jeff Loeb. Because how he goes about, for example, when I know you like all the action. That's why I recommended Mark Millar, but I like the psychoanalysis of particular characters. That's why when you go with Jeff Loeb, he took a Fantastic Four piece. And it was, if you check out all the Ultimate stuff, the Ultimate Fantastic Fours, Ultimate Spider-Man was freaking awesome.
I like the smaller press stuff if the art is good and the writing is good, which
there actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have to go through like the comics that I have, because there's a bunch that I think that you would. I pick up a lot of the smaller time stuff, the smaller runs. There's one called I Hate Fairy Tale Land. I Hate Fairy Tale Land you would freaking love, because it's basically a twisted take on Fairy Tale Land, and it's basically this Alice, not Alice. Yeah, it is Alice. She goes basically back to Wonderland, and it's all jacked up, and she blows off half of the moon. It's hilarious.
Good quality control. Like there's a series, Sex Criminals, about people who can freeze time by having sex. And that it's okay. The writing is the concept is great. The plotting is, it gets bogged down.
Yeah, and like I said, there's some, and I agree with you. There's some comics that are it's horrible. And I ended up going. There's one called Way of the Rat. It was dealing with old samurai culture and Japanese culture and stuff. Beautifully written, but it also has a limited run. There's a lot that I think that you would really enjoy, especially because, like I said, when you said the golden era being in the 50s and the 60s, that's not really the golden era, because there's a lot that's out there, like Superior Iron Man or Iron Man Superior. Basically, Iron Man is evil, and it's just, oh my gosh. And the way that they write it is like if you take a lot of the politics of today, that's the way it's written. It's so wild. So yeah.
All right, let's take She-Hulk. I like the idea, I like the character, I like that it's supposed to be funny, but the jokes aren't good enough.
So with She-Hulk, for example, everybody got on and loved the Deadpool stuff. She-Hulk was Deadpool in the comics. I mean, she's not going out killing a whole bunch of people. Yeah, she ends up having sex with people and stuff like that, but every guy superhero does that, so that's not really a big thing. But it's the way they do it, and she breaks that fourth wall a lot in the comics. Hence the reason why in the show that's what she did.
But if you break the fourth wall, you have to earn it with her.
Oh, she does. Take time. I'm telling you, Rick, I think if you take some time and go through some of the old She-Hulk comics, some of them are just so freaking awesome. I mean, it's phenomenal. Like I said, there is a time, and I think where you would fit is in that 80s and 90s era. If you go back to a little bit late in the 70s, going into the 80s, you had one of the greatest eras of comics. When you're talking about the Phoenix, when you're doing the whole Phoenix saga. That was.
I don't know.
You're good.
I mean, one problem is, if you ever try to watch a movie made before the 80s, it's very hard to do, because MTV came along in 1981 and they started showing music videos. Music videos have a cut a second. A 2-minute music video might consist of 100 different shots. Bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam. And we got used to getting a lot of information really fast. Movies, the average length of a tape.
I'm going to pull you both off, everybody off, because you got about a minute and a half to go.
All right. So anyway, music, everything got really fast, and everybody's really sophisticated now because we've all read everything, seen everything. And so old school shit is harder to watch. And so, we need stuff that's more modern. Like, one reason Deadpool is great is because it's got a joke a second. It's got an inside reference, 2 of those a minute, and we need all that stimulation, because
that's why honestly anime has taken over the spot of a lot of comics, comics and even cartoons, because anime is what you're talking about as well. Anime is phenomenal. Mangas are phenomenal. They're well written. And I still want you to watch Elusive Samurai, and I want to hear how you like that, because again, it tells a great story. It's freaking brutal, and then it's comedic about it.
All right, but
yeah.
Okay, we can talk about. I guess we're running out of time here. So, but it's why I like Black Mirror better than Love, Sex, and Robots, because the writing on Black Mirror is better.
Yeah, Black Mirror gets. I mean, you also have a longer time with Black Mirror. Love, Death, and Robots is just still that 12 to 20 minutes, and you're done. But you'll really like Elusive Samurai, I think, because I think that's right down your alley, where there's enough action and then there's some comedy that comes into play. But yeah, then there's some other anime. My Hero Academia is actually a really well written,
as well. But that's a longer one. Naruto, you probably wouldn't like. But yeah, check out Elusive Samurai to start with.
All right. But all I want, I don't care if it's action or not. All I want is every few seconds there has to be something that makes it worth watching. Like with Daredevil, with Jennifer Jones, with that you know, they take too long between shit that is good.
Oh, I mean, I agree. That's why I think, like I said, I like Elusive Samurai a lot.
All right, I'll take a look at it.
It's fun. It's very fun. But it looks like Mark is about to push the button.
Okay. All right. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Mark, thank you.
No problem.
I PayPal'd you a little bit.
No problem.
Okay.